there's Paul playing piano, and we're live, people. We lost him now. So, Caleb, good to see you, buddy. We're
good to see you, Mike.
Hey, Paul's turning around with his Mr. Rogers. You know, you should take your sweater off now. Oh, you don't have one.
I don't have a sweater. I don't. My collar's up though. I don't know how that happened.
Popping the collar.
Yes.
I slept in it. Popping the
a
collar.
Real Irish Channel hoodlum look.
That was a real Irish Channel hoodlum thing to do, and then, you know, I'm going to keep doing it now that you said that.
So and here we are.
I'm the one who lives in the channel now.
Yes, and we're 50. This is our big 50th show, guys. We have a very special guest for you guys today, Caleb Guilliot from here in New Orleans, good friend of both of ours. We grew up with the man. And he's just sort of been a staple. I don't know if you've seen his acoustic show that he did for years. Was it weekly? The Pony Show?
Oh, well, I mean, Dead Dick sold, you know, a million records.
Duh, I'm sorry.
Paul
does that part better. You do that part, Paul. You do the.
Well, I mean, because here was Cowboy Mouth, you know, trying to get our major label deal, and bam, Dead Dick gets signed out of a tiny label in Atlanta, Ichiban, which gets picked up by a big distributor, and they land a song in the movie Dumb and Dumber, and just blast off. They're touring Japan. They're touring. You know, we actually opened for them in Monroe at a big auditorium there, and it was really fun to see your friends fill a 10,000 seat arena. And I actually walked out to the doors where everybody was waiting to get in, to sort of watch them and watch the kids rush past me, not knowing who the fuck I was, trying to get a seat to see Dead Dick. It was cool. And but Caleb and I. Well, you and I had been friends long before either band really had got any notoriety. We met each other at those songwriter nights that the Gretsch brothers used to have at the Wolf. And I was telling Mikey before you came on in the pre-show that we used to meet up before the night started. We sit on the sidewalk out front and play each other our latest song. And it was one of the healthiest songwriting competitions I ever had in my life, because it was never about, oh, that's pretty good, let me try and do better. It was always like, man, that's awesome. Let me see if I can write something good that he'll like too, We really respected each other.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like before I got to know your music through one, initially, seeing you play, Backbeats and then Cowboy Mouth, but got to really know your music and hear that first record, Jet Black on Jealous. I did not put nearly as much work into writing lyrics as I did music. I was so much more focused on churning. If I had a great little musical idea, if I didn't have a great lyrical idea, I sort of didn't care. And getting to know you in those evenings, sitting on sidewalks, really made me think, you know what? Paul is caring about both elements. I need to care about both elements of a song and not just say, oh, I can throw any words. I'll be clever rather than, earnest or thoughtful. And that'll get me through. But I agree. I think those were some of my favorite moments when people ask me, oh, you must just have great memories of the ride Dead Dick had. I said, I do. But about the 4 years before we got signed are still maybe some of my happiest memories of music. And a lot of that was hanging out with you at your house back on Carrollton, where we'd sit there and write songs, play songs together. Those singer-songwriter nights, opening for Cowboy Mouth or going to see Cowboy Mouth, hoping to get called on stage just for the little contact high of that adoration in those early days when, rock and roll was getting exciting again in New Orleans after sort of being irrelevant in New Orleans for a few years, other than heavy metal. That's all that people cared about in New Orleans in the mid to late 80s.
Yeah, it was a weird time for those of us who loved real rock and roll, because like now, post-Katrina, there's a lot of rock bands, there's a lot of rock clubs, but before Katrina, for original rock music, you had to go uptown mostly. And the scene was sort of thriving in the late 70s and early 80s because the drinking age was still 18.
Yep.
But then they changed the drinking age, and then it really dried up. It was really hard to make a living playing rock music in New Orleans, which prior to that.
Cover bands were always a thing, but man, that late 70s, early 80s, Totally Cold, Normals, Cold, RZA with Lenny Zenith. There were a lot of cool bands that were happening.
Absolutely.
I was telling Paul that the first time I saw you play, I was playing with, I don't even remember the name of the band now, but it was some little band that the guy from my bank had asked me to come and try out or whatever. So we did a handful of gigs, but we were in the West Bank, and you were playing that night. Like we were playing after you or something like that, and that was the first time I saw you. And I think we had, like I said, I was probably 19, 20 years old, so I was still young, and my favorite band that I saw out was this band that you were in, and so I had to figure out who you were because it's got this little guy who could sing his ass off, and at the time you had a piece of New Age Girl. It was a New Age Girl, because I was telling Paul, I don't remember exactly. It's like the lyrics had changed by the time you did it for real, you know, the one that became a hit, but you had pieces of it. It felt like there was either the chorus or something that you had going on. Maybe you did. Maybe I'm just misremembering it. Maybe it was always a piece, but it felt like it wasn't that song. I remember when that came out, I was like, he took the best parts of his little hooks there and put them into this New Age Girl song.
I think what happened was, in the band before Dead-Eye Dick was a band called Misfit Toys.
That's right.
And Mark Miller, who, you know, is a bass player and, you know, longtime friend, you know, he started with me in Misfit Toys and then continued. He was the only connective tissue into Dead-Eye Dick. I gave him a demo of songs when we first met, when I was trying to lure him, because he was this tall, handsome bass player that a couple of girls that I worked with had gone to see and said, this guy can play. He was like jamming with the Batiste brothers and stuff like that. It's like some white boy from Lake Charles is playing bass with the Batiste brothers. I know he's good. Then I went and saw him, and he's like this sculpted 6'2" Adonis. I'm going, like, I'm a pretty ordinary looking dude. I need handsome fellas with me, so to get the girls to the gig. So I give him this tape of songs, and it had like songs that were, some of which, you know, ended up being, you know, Second Story and Perfect Family, and some songs that ended up being Dead-Eye Dick songs, but a whole host of them. And he enjoyed that tape. He like called me up and said, I want to be in a band with you. You know, so it was an ultimate compliment, and I felt like, oh wow, somebody likes my songs that much, who's good. But he had turned the tape over, and there was a home demo of New Age Girl that I thought nothing of. I just recorded a home demo of it, literally electric guitar and me singing, and that's it. And he said, I think this song might be a hit. So I think Misfit Toys played a version of that song that's all the same musically, but that band was so different, and the drummer was so different that I think it did not end up sound. You know, Billy's just solid in the pocket drumming made that song just so much more of just a pop rock. You know,
that's like That Thing You Do story, man. That's like that Thing You Do story where the way that they play it changes the whole feel and vibe of it. Yes, the drummer changes the whole thing. Awesome. So you were telling us about, you know, we had about a 20-minute conversation, guys, before we went on the air today, and so we're here a little early because we were finally like, what the hell are we doing? We gotta go live. This is great stuff. But you were telling us.
Before we get into the movie stuff, when I have a rock friend on, I ask him this question. John Lennon once said that one had to completely humiliate oneself to be a Beatle. For me, that moment was when Jenny Says was getting radio action around the country, and there was this DJ in Chicago that loved this man, Cal, who was really good at offending everyone that loves you. And so we would always go on his show because he loved Fred, naturally enough. And he had decided to do a live remote. So we arrived in, I believe, Joliet, Illinois at like 4:30 in the morning on a tour bus. And there's kids lined up waiting to get into this radio remote with Mancow. And it's in a strip mall. And it's a strip club. And we are playing Jenny Says behind 6 strippers who are dancing in front of us. And the Mancow's sidekick was a guy named Turd, who was very overweight, and on this occasion was wearing nothing but blue paint. He was naked wearing blue paint. His name was Turd, and he was screaming at the audience. So for me, that John Lennon, one has to completely humiliate oneself to be a Beatle moment, is the 6 strippers and the fat guy painted blue screaming at the audience while we played Jenny Says. I was wondering if Dead-Eye Dick had a similar...
Well, first of all, I have a question. Was Fred furious that he was not also naked and painted
in blue?
I don't know that Fred has gotten over it yet.
Yeah, he was upstaged on his own stage, and he was probably
yes, because everybody knows he loves being naked.
Well, you know, I don't know, Paul. The funny thing is that Mancow was really supportive of us. Like he loved us. Obviously, again, that song, you know, New Age Girl certainly fit into his wheelhouse of high energy, funny with double entendre, and it was very popular, right? The Chicago, he he had probably a lot to do with it being huge in the Chicago market, but it was huge in that entire market. And we also played an early morning Hard Rock Cafe in Chicago, 5:30 in the morning, maybe, for his morning show or whatever. But for whatever reason, I don't recall any humiliations involved with it. Yeah, there were no like hippie chicks dressed up to come dance in front of us or something like that. There was no. Maybe he had realized his missed opportunity and said, when Cowboy Mouth comes, for the wall, definitely pile on. But honestly,
I feel so much better about it now. That's great.
yeah, I just recently had an interview with Alex Rawls because New Age Girl is finally available on Spotify, a version, a very faithful re-recording of the song we did, because because of all the bankruptcies with Ichiban and people, the first album was just not available anywhere on streaming services.
Crazy.
So we at least re-recorded New Age Girl back in the early aughts, and we've got that
Neat.
streaming. So Alex Rawls interviewed us just to talk about those times. And over years of thinking about it, one thing that I thought was that probably one of the things that kept us from being a bigger band was that I should have found a different singer for the band, somebody with charisma, because while I think I'm a good singer, I'm not a really great frontman in that classic sense of drawing all eyes to you. Let's face it, Paul, you've got it. Fred's got it. The very best lead singers are people that people want to watch. And I'm like a regular guy that probably people enjoyed seeing sing, but I was not haunting their dreams after they left. And if we would have gotten some really charismatic guy or girl to front our band, I feel like we might have had a shot while we were building that following live to have like a real core audience who adored us. But I think we were a little more of a forgettable band. We were good and people liked us, but then okay, let's go see Tonic next week and let's go see Semisonic.
I don't think you give yourself enough credit, though. Honestly,
I don't think you do either.
You guys were, but partially what I thought I saw from the outside looking in, and maybe I missed the whole thing, but it seemed like, musically you guys grew past what Dead Eye Dick was. Whenever you're a band, you're a thing, right? And so people expect you to be that thing, period, which, New Age Girl makes a strong statement, but it's probably not representative of the rest of what Dead Eye Dick was. And
it was the outlier on the record.
It was an outlier.
A lot of bands, that happens to a lot of bands. Their
Right.
biggest hit is the outlier. People get disappointed. Although we had other power pop songs, like our follow-up single is Perfect Family, which in a perfect world probably would have been a viable follow-up single, but
coming after New Age Girl, it's so different that people
Well, you
don't
also have to take into account that same time period, your success and the beginning of our recording career, Mouth's recording career, was pretty much the end of the music business as it was. And radio was dying.
It was coming to an end, yeah.
It was coming to an end. And the music business in the early 90s, the record companies decided, because it was coming to an end, they decided they didn't want to try and do catalog music, where they were signing you to a long-term contract and nurturing your career like they had done for years with other bands. And they wanted one-hit wonders that they could drop and use as a tax write-off and move on to the next song. And that was a good plan for the first 5 years. But then they started realizing we're not going to have any catalog music. We're not going to have Tom Petty's music to sell 40 years later or Fleetwood Mac's music to sell 40 years later. And by the time they started trying to nurture artists again, Napster had come along, streaming had come along, the whole world was different. So you were at the very beginning of a period where artists just weren't much cared for anymore. It was all business.
Well, and the other thing is, counterintuitively, we signed with a small label thinking that was the indie alternative thing to do, because when we signed, we had offers from every major label, and we thought we were doing this smart, almost like hipply virtuous thing by going with the small label. We're going to be their priority. We're going to literally know the name of every person who works there. It's going to be a partnership. It turns out small labels rip you off too. One, but also if we would have gone with a large label, there's the other thing that I was talking to Alex about that I've come to realize over the years is that we also didn't really have an identity as a band. We were three guys. And perhaps with a major label, Clive Davis was super obsessed with us. And this is a guy who has built some of the biggest artists in history. Who knows, if we would have signed with Arista, maybe there would have been a cohesive identity to who Dead Eye Dick was when they were marketing us. And I know that, the whole commodification and commercialization of art is a discussion for another time, but we were a pop rock band. So we were signing up for that to begin with.
Yeah.
We had no illusions that we were in any way rarefied artists. We were artisans. We were people who wrote songs that we thought were good and catchy and would be really happy if people liked them. I've never really wanted to be famous, but I definitely would have loved to have gotten rich, from music.
To be fair, it was nice that you guys were able to walk in too with a product and go, look, it's finished. Here you go.
Yeah.
And it was already, something that people, I think, weren't there DJs already playing it around
Well,
the country?
that was the other pressure, is that 99X was playing. Stephen Klein had hired a guy to do some promotion. And one of the first stops was he was buddies with the program director at 99X in Atlanta, which at the time was arguably maybe the third most influential radio station in the United States after K-Rock and NYC, whatever the station was in NYC, New York City. They were breaking bands on a regular basis. They were the first station, and because of their reach, Atlanta being a city of 4 million people, and the South, basically the New South, they were the voice of the New South. So the station in Charlotte, the station in Birmingham, the stations in New Orleans, stations in Gainesville were all following 99X's lead. So when they play Collective Soul, all those other stations play Collective Soul. Collective Soul becomes famous. So same thing, Steven gets that song spun. He juices it a little bit. He gets all his friends to call in. But allegedly, what I'm told, the myth of Dead Eye Dick was that after they played New Age Girl the first time in the afternoon on 99X, sorry.
That's probably somebody calling Age Girl right now.
It's my dentist's office.
Okay.
When they played New Age Girl, allegedly they got multiple thousands of calls saying, "Who is this?" I don't know if that's true, but that's what we were told.
I actually believe it. The hook is so fucking strong in that song, and it's such a catchy song. I mean, it's a great song.
Yeah, and also for the mood. I mean, we're all older. You guys are old enough to remember what Atlanta was like in 1994, but it was like this bustling city with literally hundreds of thousands of people between the ages of like 21 and 30 with disposable income, a bunch of college grads. It had the largest LSU alumni association. Like there's something like 17,000 LSU grads in Atlanta. All these young people making money, the classic yuppie thing. And that song was probably just catnip for a bro or a former sorority girl driving around in their ragtop, BMW, go into their really high paying job for a 25-year-old dude or lady. And it was like, yeah, this is the song of summer for me. This is it right here. And I think that was one of the things that really made that song happen. Was a lot of our crowd, like in New Orleans, I think, we probably played with Beaten Path or something at that point, or whatever band you had, 94. That so much of our crowd were like LSU med school people, graduate, because I had a lot of friends there, and so they became our crowd. LSU class of 94, and all these sort of like young professionals who were between 25 and 30 who loved Dead Eye Dick. And so when we didn't have a crowd as big as Cowboy Mouths, but our 400 people who'd come see us at the Howlin' Wolf in 94 before we got signed were mostly young professionals. They weren't college kids and they weren't old folks. They were like, that was our hip crowd.
And you actually, when you said New Age Girl, you weren't fucking around. I mean, it was you were painting a portrait of that time period. That was the other reason probably became the song of the summer, is because people, associated with it.
Yeah, they all had a friend or an acquaintance or a relative who was the crystal rubbing, patchouli wearing New Age guy or girl.
Right. Vegan.
It did have some resonance within the community, because it seemed like everybody would come up to me saying, "That's my sister you're singing about," or "That's my brother you're singing about." He's such a, he's a massage therapist, unlicensed.
Shmoo was just asking about the video for that song. She goes, "What the hell was that video for that song?" You guys did a video for it? I didn't even know.
Well, we actually did two. We did a real quickie, cheap one that you can find out there. It's mostly black and white, that Ichiban paid for really quick. But then when we were getting on the Dumb and Dumber soundtrack, RCA paid for the guy, Axel, who directed this video, was like childhood friends with Bjork and had just done the big Guns N' Roses tour biopic, in '94. That he was like a really skilled director, Icelandic dude, and so RCA paid for a really expensive, high budget thing. So the whole Pumpkinhead thing was all associated with Dumb and Dumber. It had nothing to do with the song or anything.
Right.
We had just played a show in Minneapolis. We had a show scheduled in Ames, Iowa. So we go to Ames, Iowa, to a wheat field or cornfield, whatever, and film all that shit in the field. And then they shoot. It was right before Halloween, so it was a Halloween party at the number one college bar in Ames, Iowa, and that's where we're playing. And so they filmed, people in costume were allowed to get in early. So our whole audience were people in costumes, including a bunch of people willing to wear pumpkin heads while dancing around. I think we did the song about 3 or 4 times before the show, lip syncing it for the cameras, and then we played our show.
Oh, that's amazing.
Exhausting fucking day.
Yeah. Everyone's
up at like 5 a.m.
Have you seen the new Stars Born Bradley Cooper version?
I haven't. I'm aware of the film. I've seen like snippets from it, and aware of sort of the vibe of it.
Right. It's actually
a lot of people love it.
Yeah, I recommend it. It's there's a lot of movies out. It's one worth spending a couple hours with. But there's some scenes that they shot over at, I think, Coachella and Bonnaroo, where they literally had 10 minutes like between sets. They gave them some time between sets, so they had the crowd and everything, and they tell the crowd what's happening. And it doesn't hurt that what's her name, Lady Gaga.
Right. And Bradley Cooper is pretty well beloved too, so it probably doesn't hurt.
Right,
but he's the guy. Hey guys, we're gonna do this.
Yes, and so the shots are awesome. Some of those quick shots. They probably did it at 7 o'clock every day, so it's twilight. Sun's
magic
going.
Hour
magic hour, really cool looking stuff. But there's probably about 4 scenes. Go ahead, sorry.
Now that we've wandered over to film, after Dead Eye Dick years, you yourself wandered over to film.
Yes.
How'd that happen? What was your first move?
Well, the first move I ever did was Dead Eye Dick was not over yet. It was 1998 Double Jeopardy, and it's because we were intentionally taking like a 6-month break from touring. We'd been on the road nonstop at that point, and Mark and Billy were both recently married, and they wanted to actually spend some time with their wives before we went back out on the road. So Mark and Billy had both done PA work before we got signed. I think they both worked on JFK and Pelican Brief. So they knew a bunch of the film people in town. Mark had gotten a call from a friend to do a French Independent, so he's doing that. And then he got a call for Double Jeopardy, and he's like, "I'm sorry, guys, I'm busy." He called me up and said, "Hey, man, I know you're not really doing anything right now. Other than probably looking for Paul to go write songs with or something. These guys are doing something." So I was at art department PA on that movie, which was a total blast because they came into town way under budget and they didn't want to look like idiots. So they were throwing around money in this town like drunken sailors. They actually ruined a lot of locations permanently because they overpaid for locations. So the next time movies came in and said, "Hey, we want to film here for $5,000. Said, "Oh, well, last time somebody paid us $25,000. So that's what we're expecting." Yeah, but it was really fun because basically art department PA, really easy job. I met a lot of really cool people, and I got to buy them whatever they wanted to eat and drink every day. So they loved me.
Right.
And I learned a little bit, but then I went back on tour for another couple of years, and I didn't really get back into the film business until I worked on The Real World, the first Real World in 2000.
Yeah.
I helped light that house with Paul Oland. I don't know if you guys know him, but he sings and writes songs as well. But he's a leading director of photography here in town. He was the DP. He was a lead gaffer and then became the DP on NCIS New Orleans a little bit. He would DP splinter units and stuff like that. But I helped light the house, and then I became a camera assistant on the first season of The Real World in 2000. Met more people, and then started like just getting film jobs versus a PA. And then I got the gig. Michael Martin, a local prop master, who's a great guy, and his wife Edith LeBlanc, is a UPM, but also used to own a lingerie shop, and she would do the Super Bowl parties in New Orleans for years before the film stuff really got solid here. He said, "Hey man, I'm doing this small movie. You want to be my art department coordinator? I think you could do it." And I didn't know anything about the job, but then I did it and I learned it, and I started doing it more and more. And now I'm sort of the most experienced person doing that gig in state.
Orleans. Yeah.
Great.
Wow. And the state.
You were with NCIS New Orleans for all 7 seasons?
All
6
7 years. I
seasons?
I was the first person, other than the production designer, I was the first person hired for that job, and I was the first person on the ground. Early May of 2014 until we shut it down in early April of 2021.
Now, I'd like you to, you can confirm or deny the myth, but there's been a lot of talk, mostly from me, that that one of the reasons they shut down was because there was a push from the fans to get Detective Dillard, who I played, back onto the show, and that Scott Bakula, nice guy, but that he had been a little threatened.
He was threatened. Look, you can go ahead. You can go ahead and say it, Paul. He was threatened.
Well, my natural Guatemalan heat, he was a little intimidated.
It was your heat, but also, Paul, you have, to me, one of the legendary, beautiful singing voices that I've envied. But you also have a great speaking voice, which I even envy more because I have this adenoidal, very mid-rangey nasal voice, and you have this deep, beautiful, rich, ropa vieja of a voice. Whereas I
love that. I'm going to use it.
I have a thin
means.
consomme of a voice. You have a hearty ropa vieja. And yeah, let's face it, Bakula was threatened. He knew he couldn't figure out a New Orleans accent, so he committed to a Southern accent early on, and he got flack about that probably on Twitter and Instagram and anywhere else where people posted. Whereas you come up and you've just got a beautiful voice, Guatemalan heat, and then let's face it, man, you're a handsome gentleman, and he did not want to be upstaged by you at this stage in his career.
I respected the show's decision to fold to protect their star, and I'm fully expecting, after a short time passes and he's allowed to save face, that there will be a Detective Dillard spinoff.
Absolutely. Have you not heard from the guys yet? Have you not heard from Chris?
I want you to know you're my first call. When it happens, you're my
Thank you,
first
sir.
call.
I appreciate it. I would love to do anything I can to support your rise to stardom.
That's right.
Now, I will say this about NCIS New Orleans. We were talking about this earlier. When I was traveling around the country, warming up for shows and really homesick for New Orleans, they shot, the director of photography filmed the show so beautifully. And I would just turn the show on with the sound down and just look at my beautiful New Orleans while I warmed up for shows. Yeah. And I asked Tim Cohen once, who was also on the show for the full run, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And he said that he asked the director of photography what he did to make it look so good. And he said the guy smiled and said, "It's New Orleans. I just filmed it."
Yeah, because if you look at his interiors, if you look at the interiors, they're not quite as great as far as the way he filmed it, because he was so addicted to atmosphere, to smoke in the mist in the air. The very Paul Schrader kind of look from the early '80s. But the other person we should give credit to, though, on that, and I want to call him out because he's a big music lover. I know he's a fan of yours, Paul. Was our directing producer, Jim Heyman, who wasn't with us for the last season, but he was with us for the first 6 seasons. That guy loved New Orleans and was always pushing the locations department to say, "We've seen this. Let's see something else equally amazing." Nice. He was such a lover of New Orleans, such a lover of New Orleans. He was the guy that Kyle Lamy, our music guy, had to get approvals from. The showrunners too, but Jim Heyman was the guy who was pushing. Let's get this musician. I saw this musician Saturday night. Let's get this musician. He was out there as a music fan, constantly watching people, but also as a lover of the city. He bought a beautiful house on Broadway, and his wife is Annie Potts. Whenever she was in town, they would go see music. They came and saw Pony Space, at the Ugly Dog Saloon. And I couldn't have been more grateful, that he would come see me play.
Neat.
Because I'm just playing for the last 15 years, really. I've only been playing for fun, not for any. There's no goal, there's no profit. It's just to do it for fun, which is a lot more fun, by the way.
Boy.
But he was always out there. So Jim Heyman, total shout out. That guy, whatever project he produces next, I will consume because I respect that guy as a human being and as a film and television craftsperson. He's amazing at his job.
Can you talk about your next project right now? Is it something that's out, or is it sort of still under?
Yeah, well, what I'm working on now, I definitely want to give a shout out to. What I'm wrapping up is a film called National Champions, very low budget, but um, I will say it is a football movie with no football in it at all. And the production designer Clay Griffith, who is an awesome guy and brilliant at his work. If you look him up, he's Melanie Griffith's half brother. If you look up his IMDb, he is production designed or set decorated about 50 movies that you know, like Jerry Maguire and Almost Famous and all these incredible movies. He's really good friends with Cameron Crowe, but he's done a million different movies, Eddie Murphy movies, a zillion things. And he's great at his gig. But he told me when he was selling me on this movie, he said, it's like The Insider. It's almost all people talking, but the story is so good. And it's compelling. It's an issue we're all talking about college players getting paid to play. So it is a story in the headlines that will continue to be in headlines when this movie probably comes out in January or something like that, or February. It's really good. J.K. Simmons, Kristen Chenoweth, Timothy Olyphant, Tim Blake Nelson,
Wow.
Jeffrey Donovan,
Hey,
Lil Rel. It's like all these really talented actors, really well written, compelling story. And it's not just giving a monolithic, since, we might be a bunch of liberal filmmakers who we're only presenting the side of the athletes wanting to get paid. We're showing the various sides and complications to doing this as well. I'm really impressed with the movie. It wasn't a heavy lift from the art department. Much of it is in hotel rooms where we shot. I'm at a ballroom in the Hyatt right now. That's where my office was. But I think it's going to be really good. The dailies that I saw, we get some really good performances.
Neat.
Nice.
These people
Nice.
who are great. And the writing, I mean, it was there. I reread the script. I had, for work, but also I reread the script about 5 or 6 times. And it was like, yeah, I want to see this movie.
It's interesting. Is my daughter plays college ball for Rhodes, and we were looking at colleges. One of the things that they hold out these days is the fact they call it, what were they calling it at the time? Transportation budget. So they just start trying to figure out ways to give the athletes money. And it was right during the time, because this was about 5 years ago, I guess. She's junior this year, finishing up, about to be a senior. So it was during her junior year in high school. And all of a sudden all the colleges, including the one that she's at now, had a budget of extra money beyond the scholarship pay and all that stuff, beyond all the food and everything else. This is just, they called it transportation money. But it was a way to sort of quiet down those calls.
To slip some people some money.
Yeah, start slipping people money just so that they could be like, look, they are getting something extra for it. And, I don't know where all of that wound up. I'd be interested in seeing what the point of view of the movie, or at least, what the movie touches on. But I do remember that, I think one of the colleges was offering $15,000 a school year. So of just extra money. It's, here you go. This is on top of everything else.
Well, I've got an answer. I have a proposal. Do y'all want to hear? Or is this too much sports talk?
No. Let's go. We talk about everything.
So my whole solution is that there's only really 2 gigantic revenue-producing sports, and that's men's basketball and men's football, right? So you separate those out. They are no longer NCAA sports. They become aligned to the NFL or the NBA. But what you do is they pay gigantic licensing fees to the colleges, since there is a built-in. They are still, so Alabama is still Alabama. They play at Alabama. They are neither students nor employees of Alabama. They're employees of the NFL. If they're Alabama football, let's say, they're paid on a scale, just like the 5-star recruits get paid more than the 1-star recruits. The 3rd-string dudes. But the licensing fees they pay to Alabama, LSU, Georgia, whatever, help pay for all those other sports, the non-revenue producing sports.
Title IX.
And the reason they pay that licensing fee is because, let's face it, Alabama is going to draw more people than the Jacksonville Jaguars any day. They're still doing great gate. They're still going to do great television. So they will pay tens of millions of dollars. They'll still earn all that money for the University of Alabama, for LSU, for Florida. They just won't be students. And so you won't have that complication. The kids can enroll in school, but if they want to play for the University of Alabama Division I football team, it's not an NCAA program. It is a professional minor league team.
That's interesting.
As a feeder system. And so you don't have these legal problems. People who want to go to college will go to colleges. And every school like Tulane and Rice should stop being Division One, stop giving scholarships, just be academic institutions, and students come and play football for fun, and 10,000 people will go see you play on Saturday.
Right.
But don't worry about all the rest of it.
Because I was going to think, I mean, like at that point, do the colleges, nothing's simple, right? It seems like, everything's easy on the surface. But, at that point, yeah, exactly. So at that point, who gets to control what the players are? Like, say the NFL's like, no, this guy isn't good enough to be paid by us and things like that, and maybe maybe academics become even less of a factor in a situation like that, where
Absolutely. Academics become no factor.
Right. You're right, because now it's a business. It's definitely just
they're just a minor league team. They're just doing what baseball has been doing for 100 years, which is paying for their minor league teams.
Gotcha. And that's interesting. That's an interesting. Let's see. What's Shmoo saying? She's talking about if you're a golfer, a full ride to Tulane is a good thing. If you're a really good football player and you break collarbone in college, it wasn't worth it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the things, like in our film, one of the things that the guy is our main character is the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback for one of the teams in the national championship game, who's going to boycott the game with his tight end and trying to get other people to boycott it to get a guarantee. The number one guarantee is an irrevocable trust for every player, so that if they're injured, they have some money.
Right.
Right. That guarantees them something after their body is completely broken down from playing college football.
Right.
So you're allowed to talk about the plot of the film. Nobody's going to come in black suits and sunglasses and drag you off screen.
No, because it's not a Marvel movie. I mean, if anything, they want people talking about this movie.
Right.
This is a story. I'm sure that pretty soon people will be talking about, the movie. It's not super secret, and I'm not giving away the plot points of the movie. I'm just saying what it's about.
Right.
The plot of the movie is pretty compelling, and
I didn't want to see you get disappeared.
I
just didn't want to see you get disappeared.
Yeah, you could get disappeared by these money people in, the movie industry, right? They come in and they're like, "All right, enough of you, Mr.
I've seen it happen. It's not.
Look, I already signed an NDA for the interview thing. I can't talk about that.
Right. So that's the one you can't talk about. That sounds like an interesting one too. You notice
it's going to be good.
You notice he's got Fats Domino behind him, huh? He's learned how to play piano, Paul, and so
I noticed that.
He sits there and he looks at Fats Domino and then stumbles around on the keyboard. It's really a pretty thing. It's a beautiful thing.
Dude,
I think that you just described he described my style very accurately. I stumble around on the keyboard.
Stumble around. That's like me on the keyboard too. But did y'all know this? I heard this story about 2 years ago that reggae. The reason we have reggae is because of Fats Domino and bad radio signal.
Really?
So obviously Fats Domino is one of the biggest artist in the world in the 50s, right? He's a hugely popular artist who's getting played on the radio all the time. In Jamaica, they're listening to America, and if you watch that movie, The Harder They Come with Jimmy Cliff, they do intimate that R&B is a huge influence. Gospel and R&B are the things that influence reggae along with the Caribbean rhythms. But the story goes that people are listening to, I'm trying to remember the exact That's Domino song, but just for sake of argument, let's say "Walking." So you think I'm walking, yes indeed I'm walking. Well, because of the crappy radio signal, they're hearing, ching, 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 ching. That's the only rhythm they're hearing.
Right.
They're not hearing the doom 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 doom. They're hearing doom 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 doom. And that is what. So when they're covering the song at the parties, they're playing "I'm walking." Yes. And that is how reggae is born, is New Orleans stride music and rock and roll getting lost in the airwaves in Jamaica and informing their rhythm.
That's a beautiful thing.
Once again, Ernie Cado's famous quote, coming back to prove its truth, he said, "I'm not certain, but I'm pretty sure all music started in New Orleans."
I'm a big believer. I did a Facebook post a couple of years ago noting the population of Louisiana and then the breadth of influence in music when you count not only jazz, R&B, rock and roll, a lot of contributions to hip hop, bounce music exists because of us, and all those things. And then you talk about the tiny population of Louisiana and the outsized influence we've had on the world of music. we're the most important place in the world when it comes to music. I'm sorry, there is no other place. I've always been like against the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but if you're going to have it, it should only be in Memphis, New York, or New Orleans.
Right.
Those are the
Yeah, I don't know
only three
what
places.
happened.
I'm sorry. I love Cleveland. I think it's a great town. Maybe have some sort of
The mistake by the
some
Malay.
sort of meat pasta museum, but certainly not rock and roll.
A meat pasta
It's
museum
Memphis,
with
or I'd say, and honestly, the underserved place is Tupelo, since Bo Diddley and Elvis both from Tupelo. Put it there, but do not put it anywhere but New Orleans, Memphis, Tupelo, maybe New York, because New York had so much to do with getting previously segregated music played on mainstream radio.
Did you notice there that
yeah.
Alan Smason says he wasn't sure about that theory, Caleb. He thinks ska was the big influence on. What does he say?
Well, ska is just proto reggae, but that's what they're saying. Ska was born from guys hearing.
Right.
That's the story. The radio story I heard was talking about how
Will
in Jamaica they could hear only that much of the beat, and
The
so
upbeats of the whole thing or whatever, right?
Bands are just, ska is just proto
will
reggae
say,
for all intents and
when I
purposes.
recorded my song "No Bothering You" for Between Friends, Herman Ernest Jr. was playing drums. Very experienced drummer, great drummer.
Yeah, great.
And I said to him, Herman, man, I've been in Cowboy Mouth for a lot of years. You know, I want this to have a real New Orleans feel, but I'm not quite sure of the groove. And he just took over the session. He goes, all right. He says, Mikey, you go and play a little rhythm and blues line for me. And because Mike was playing bass. And he goes, Paul, you're just going to play it like this. And he showed me, I said, that's reggae. And he goes, yeah, baby. Mikey's going to play rhythm and blues. You're going to play reggae. And I'm going to walk it New Orleans style. And we're going to have New Orleans music. And so reggae is right at the heart of New Orleans rhythm and blues music. I got that explained to me by one of the greatest drummers who ever drummed in New Orleans.
Yeah, just that downbeat guitar. You know, while the bass is all in upbeats and the drums are walking, but you know, in the pocket behind the beat.
You know, it's interesting the way creativity works. Like they're hearing this version of it, and it probably just sparked an idea, right? I mean, the only reason why I say that is because I was just recently, I've been wanting to write a particular, just an idea. I've been trying to like write an idea, right, forever, but it just takes a certain bit of inspiration, and then suddenly it's there, right? I mean, even songwriting was always that way with me. Like I would try to write something, and forever you just like, I'm not like Paul. I can't just sit there and it's not like a job. I have to have fucking something, an idea first, you know?
Yeah, me too.
And
It's
so,
not like a job.
well, you used to be able to just sit down and write something. It was crazy. It was like, you know, either ideas just came to you like crazy, or but every day you would write. I remember there was a time when every morning.
No,
you'd get up and
he's
write
a
song.
he's a magician.
Yes.
Paul is not a normal human being when it comes to writing. He has more to say and more ways to say it than any four songwriters in him.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. But you know, when ideas strike you, just the way that works, and I'm sure listening to that, you know, coming across there, somebody was like, "This is cool," even though they probably knew something was wrong. They felt something was cool, and it gave them an idea, right? What if we tried to feel like this or something like that? You know, I just love where that idea, creativity kind of stuff comes from. Something totally unrelated gives you an idea that moves you forward. It sounds like you're starting to get busy phone calls, huh? Caleb, or at least...
Yeah, you know, just little bits and bobs. We're wrapping up this movie, but there's not much to do. But a couple of little things we got to take care of.
Just
we're trying to. We're actually trying to donate a bunch. Since we had a football movie with no football, but we had a bunch of helmets for decor at a boosters dinner. We're trying to give those to Nord, so we're just working that out right now.
Gotcha.
That's great. I'm so glad to hear that, Caleb. That's really cool.
Oh, these guys,
doing that.
The producers on this film, very generous. They, you know, it's very low budget, but they wanted to give back any way they could. They wanted to make, you know, I think all the clothing, a whole bunch of other stuff is going to shelters and stuff like that. So they're looking at, they're not trying to make money on anything.
Nice. Yeah, of course.
I'm loving it.
You know, tax credits aren't enough, man. We got to keep. By the way, did they ever figure that and work that out? Where I remember hearing that there was a certain budget, and like once that budget was done, the tax credits were done that year, and that was one of the reasons things sort of.
I'm not sure because it seems like more and more stuff is coming here.
Right.
One, thanks to the.
That stupid bill. I'm just hoping that we don't do some sort of stupid bill here.
Me too. I've got my fingers crossed, man.
Me too. I'm like going, geez, don't screw this up, guys. Please, you know.
Yeah, because we got all the work right now, man.
It's all coming here. Yeah. Let's keep our fingers crossed. I got a couple buddies that are working on the Reese Witherspoon thing as well. A couple friends.
Yeah.
Which is a really cool thing. So
My wife loved that podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got to wrap up a little bit early today because I'm taking my wife to the doctor.
Hope everything's okay.
Yeah, it's we're trying to get into the system. She's, these days, hospital, doctor things these days, just you got to get into the system to get a referral to do whatever, and that takes 6 weeks or whatever, So I'm just trying to get in the system. But
I hear you, man.
But it's been great talking to you. Paul, do you want to wrap up on anything before we go? You had any questions or ideas before we wrapped up today?
No, I was just really pleased to see my friend who I used to see regularly. Of course, now as we all got older, I see him rarely. So it's nice to see him. Great to hear some stories about Dead Eye Dick, and really exciting for me to hear your work in the film business. It's been impressive to watch from afar, but I've never really asked you about it or talked to you about it, and it's really great, man. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of my brother Johnny. I'm proud of Tim Cohen and all the guys that started out doing exactly how I did, and then found their niche and got a little higher up in the ladder there.
Tim Cohen, former inhabitant of your butler's pantry.
That's right.
Right.
Real quick before we go, does Pony Space doing anything coming up? You guys got any gigs?
I haven't even seen the ladies since we went into lockdown.
Gotcha.
So I'm hoping to get together with Elizabeth and Aaron sometime soon and start playing again. I think I think we're all vaxxed, so I think we could probably hang out now and sing amongst each other, no problem.
Right.
I definitely miss it. But Paul, I'm off for the next month, so maybe you and I can get together and strum on some tunes.
I haven't been writing or even singing regularly in the last 3 years. I had a couple of throat surgeries that left me with vocal dystonia. But I'm working on it. I've found a teacher who's worked with dystonia before, and it's really been helpful. So, cool. If the voice comes back, I'll start writing again for sure.
Well, and maybe since I have so little to say, I've got music. Maybe you can help me with some lyrics. You can have some.
I'm always good for that. Always.
I keep trying to talk him into that. I was like, you don't have to be the guy who's singing it. Just kind of come and hang out and help us, get the ideas straight. Sure. I think he's good at that too. He's worked with a bunch of artists and helped them, sort of create their music, help them find their music.
Well, as I say, when somebody says they don't know how to write lyrics, I say, you say that and then you can't. But everybody knows how to write lyrics. I usually ask people, well, what were you thinking about when you write the song? And they tell me, and then the lyrics are within the story they tell me. Right. I might have to make a few things rhyme, but just letting people talk naturally is a secret to good lyrics. It should be just how you talk.
I agree 100%. When you sound stage and there's a level of pretense, that's when it doesn't ring true.
Right. The other funny part of it is Paul acts like that's such an easy thing to do as well, right? It's like, you got to do is right. For him, it is such an easy thing. For us, we're like,
all you have to do is think of a brilliant idea and then think of an unusual way to couch it, the way nobody ever has before, and then make it rhyme.
Easy, right?
How hard is that?
Exactly. Well, man, it's been a kick. Thank you so much for coming on.
I really enjoyed it, fellas. Thanks so much for having me, and congratulations on your 50th episode.
That's right, 50th episode. We're hoping to get to 100. Right. We'll see what happens. We don't know.
You guys are going to do it. I really enjoy it.
We're going to give it a shot. All right, man. You take care.
Take care, guys.
Man.
All right, see you.
Be safe.
It was shaped like a cat, it was a present from my mother. I read a lot of books, but I couldn't see between the lines. I'll have another cup of coffee if you don't mind. Well, her hair is as black as an alleyway, and it used to be red, and it used to be blonde. Truth is, her hair changes color all the time. I'll have another cup of coffee if you don't mind. I'll have another cup of coffee if you don't mind. Well, I'm staring at her shoulder, but it's not what I see when I hear two fellas fighting in the booth across from me. So I wipe away the ashes from an empty county seat, and I wished I wasn't homesick, I wish I was asleep. Well, I hold her like a blanket up against my chin, and I need her like I need